Hi guys, welcome back. I'm bringing you another exclusive video here in our Facebook group, and just to say that this particular video will only be available in this particular group as well, so lucky you guys. But today I am in talk with the wonderful Michele Henshaw. Full name.
Full title. I feel like I'm in trouble now.
Who is a very well experienced and far reaching life path mentor. More on that in a second. But you've been dubbed the secret weapon, haven't you, for many influential, high-powered execs and personalities out there. How do you feel about that?
It's a mixed blessing, because it sounds like a huge compliment, which it is, and it's lovely that my clients describe me that way. However, it's not always great for business to be kept a secret.
I can see the catch in that.
So, whilst it's lovely, it can be a bit of a challenge.
I bet. I must formally say thank you for agreeing to do this video as well.
You're very welcome.
And I mentioned just a moment ago that you are a life path mentor, but for those viewers who haven't got a clue basically what a life path mentor is, will you just explain to them what it is that you do? And yeah,
I will do my best. So I suppose the first thing to say is that it's not really a thing. It's not really a thing that you're trained to do. I suppose it's just what I've called my process, the way that I work.
It's very unique. I haven't heard.
And it's born out of the way I've worked, I suppose, for the last sort of 13, 14 years. But really, way before that, starting with my own journey, my own personal journey. And it's sort of the best way I could think of describing the way that I work and the things that I do in my work. So the easiest way to describe it is if you think of setting off on an expedition or an adventure, and you have no map and no backpack and no sort of ranger guide. That's what finding your way through life and business can sometimes feel like. And having a life path is a way of sort of getting all that stuff on board so that you make the journey quicker and more easily and more effectively, I suppose. So it's a little bit like having a ranger guide in your life and or your business that has kind of been ahead of you on the journey and knows where the best paths lie, where the easiest or most exciting routes are. And where the best vistas are along the way, and the interesting diversions, but also where the obstacles are and how you might negate those.
Right.
So it's a little bit like having a ranger guide in your life and your business, I suppose, is the easiest way of describing it.
That is a really great way of thinking about it, actually. And the fact that you've described the fact that, setting out with your own business or on a new pathway in your life and not having a clue about where it is that you want to head, journeys that you want to make along the way, experiences that you want to encounter. It seems counterintuitive. Why would anybody do that? And yet lots of people do set out in life like that, don't they?
I think the majority of people do. I mean,
I'd be one of those.
I think with 99.9% of the population, maybe less so in business, but certainly in our lives, we kind of have this particularly in the West, I think we have this idea that life is just going to happen to us and or for us, and that we have no real control over the direction it takes, and it's absolutely totally untrue. I think maybe we treat our businesses a little bit differently, because we're encouraged to have business plans and think forward and all that kind of thing, but that can be just as restricting. That's almost like having a one route map. And one tool in your backpack, and really just heading off in that one direction, and then when obstacles and things show up on the way, then it can throw you off course.
I was going to ask actually, so if somebody how could someone who's watching today start to navigate or gain clarity in terms of finding that pathway to traverse, whether it's for their business or whether it's for their own life? What tips could you share for them in order to start that journey?
I think it's twofold. I think it is about firstly that realization that you have control over that. that
Yeah.
you have the ability and the capability and the power to be able to decide not only what your destination is, but what that journey is going to be like for you. But also, I would say not to get too fixated on that
Don't look at me when you say
that
that.
end destination and that route, a bit like I was saying about the business plan,
Yeah.
because you can be, I mean, I told you this fantastic story, which you may relate to everybody later, but about what can happen when you get too fixated on that.
Yeah.
You know, we hear a lot phrases like stay in your lane and stay on course and keep on track. And actually, I suppose I'm quite unconventional in the sense that I encourage people to do practically the opposite of that. That it's great to have a lane and to have a clearly defined path, but it's also great to go off course sometimes and to look at new opportunities and embrace opportunities that come along and have the challenge of overcoming obstacles as well.
I think it's also recognising when an opportunity or an obstacle, as you say, presents itself, and then thinking to yourself, okay, this could be an obstacle, a complete pain in the behind. However, equally, it could be a great opportunity for me as a person or my business. But you can't get to that position where you have that context, or you're able to stand back and recognise those signs, unless it is that you have, I suppose, the teachings and that come before, as you traverse the life path to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's about having that clearly defined path to begin with. That gives you the ability, that gives you the confidence in your own knowing.
Yeah.
I think that you know what direction you're headed in, but then you've got the room emotionally and practically to let other things happen along the way.
And I suppose that's that when you're running your own business, like a lot of people who'll be watching the video are, you don't often have, you sometimes don't even have the time to stop and go for a pee. So I don't,
Exactly.
so to stop and think, right, well, I recognise that I need help and that I want clarity, and I'd like to be able to try and navigate my business or myself at the same time to new destinations. That's how would you encourage someone who's watching today who feels as though they're in that situation, that they feel as though they don't have the time to do it, to stand back and carve out a pathway or map it out? What advice would you give to them?
Well, firstly, and please don't think I'm being mean when I say this, but firstly I would say, oh, so you have more than 24 hours in a day? Because we all have the same 24 hours in a day, right?
It's a good point, yeah.
It's just about what you do with it.
Yeah.
And how you manage it, and that is to some extent about planning, but it's also about leaving time and space. It's a bit like, you think of, I used to collect marbles, right? When I was little, I was a champion marble player. Can you believe?
Who knew?
I had my Butte Daubers and my steels and my crystals and
Okay.
So I had a huge bag, like children have towel bags for.
Oh,
I don't know
yes,
whether they
yeah,
still
yeah.
have them actually,
Yeah.
because
For swimming.
I'm quite advanced in years.
have-
So I had a towel bag crammed full
Yeah.
of all of these marbles, but I always wanted more marbles,
Yeah.
and I got quite good at it, so I was always winning more marbles.
Right.
But unless I got rid of some of the marbles in the bag, I couldn't create space for the new marbles, right?
See where you're going with this one.
So it's great to pack all those really valuable practical things in and have your path and have your plan, but it's also crucial, just as crucial, to create space along the way for those new realizations, for those new learnings, for those new opportunities that might come along.
We've talked about that a lot, haven't we, in terms of me trying to, as well as other business owners, trying to create and carve out space in that 24-hour period, that you allow your mind, your body to almost sort of like untie itself, just relax.
Yeah.
Because as business owners, you'll know as well, we just don't get that chance, or don't often get that chance. We don't allow ourselves. We feel as though we have to keep going.
We can be our worst bosses,
Yeah.
right? So I've worked for some tyrant bosses in my time. I know we came from similar background, creative industries, media, advertising, marketing. I've had some demon bosses in my time, but I can sometimes
That's
be
a whole
the
other
worst
video.
boss. Yeah, it's definitely a whole other video. But I can sometimes be the worst boss I've ever had. I'm so hard on myself. And that's been a work in progress for me. And I think the thing is, particularly for women when we set up in business, so there are a few things. There are the idea that us and our life has to be separate from our business.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, for a start.
Yeah.
Because as women, we only really connect to anything when we feel aligned. So everything has to be aligned. It's like when we try to keep our relationships separate.
Yeah.
Or, you know, when we start to separate things out, that's when we start to feel disconnected and misaligned.
Yeah.
So I think it's about getting aligned. I think there's also that thing that we always work hard for somebody else, and we do our absolute best, and we put as much in as we possibly can. So when we start to work for ourselves, we work on that same premise.
Yeah.
We work to that same pattern, because it's a deeply embedded pattern, right? That way of working. And we forget that actually one of the reasons we've probably set up in business for ourselves is because we felt we were burning out with that.
The irony.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we think we've got to not only work in the same way, but we've got to do it even faster and even harder.
And even better, and achieve more quicker. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we end up quite often getting the absolute opposite of what we were hoping for, because probably what we were hoping for was a bit more space, a bit more time with our loved ones, a bit more time for ourselves, a bit more energy, and we end up having less of all of that.
Less of all of it, absolutely. Which is even more of a reason. So if you, like me, again, are on that, you feel as though you're on that hamster wheel, you've got to keep going. At one point, you've just got to say to yourself, that's it, this isn't my purpose, this isn't the why that I began my business with.
Exactly.
Come back to that and carve out that hour a day, half an hour, whatever it might be, but put it, and it's one of your phrases that I often hear you say, it's a non-negotiable.
It's a non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable, people.
I have lots of non-negotiables.
But having that time for yourself is so important.
It is. And it is really, as you know, we were talking about it just earlier, weren't we, that for me, it goes in my diary.
Yeah.
So I have client meetings, I have my client calls, I have my marketing time, I have my time with my mentors, which is also crucially important. You know, we're not meant to journey alone in life or in business, and particularly as women, we work more effectively when we're connected and when we're held and supported. So for me to hold and support my clients, I have to feel held and supported as well. So I have time with my mentors. I have 2 mentors. So all of that goes in my diary. But just as important is the time for me. Yeah. Is my me time. And that goes in, I think I've just shared an occasion with you just recently where that happened, where I had a fantastic opportunity to connect with somebody. But the only time they could make was during a slot that is my me time. Yeah. And I had a real challenge with that even now, where I had to really stop and think about that. Do I do this? Do I give that up to seize this opportunity? What do I do? And I had to hold true to it, because I had to think about what I would tell my clients, right? And have to walk the walk.
I was going to say, take a dose of your own medicine there.
Exactly. And so I just said, no, I'm really sorry, I can't do it. And I didn't feel the need to explain why I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's just, I can't.
But that time for me, it's a Friday morning, I go to my yoga class. Yeah. I have coffee with my girlfriends afterwards. Yeah. That is a non-negotiable, because that feeds me. That's not selfish. I have particular feelings around the word selfish. But that's a whole other video as well.
Exactly.
But that feeds me emotionally. Yeah. And so that's absolutely a crucial part of the journey. It's a crucial part of my life path. It's a crucial part of what I need to run my business and my life. And so it's a non-negotiable. It's just one of
many. One of many indeed. But the good thing, well, I say, the outcome of that is that the client actually came back to you with an alternative date and time. So you didn't miss out on that opportunity. It just presented itself.
Exactly.
In a
and as
view.
often happens, you know, we convince ourselves that things are going to be a certain way if we behave in a certain way. And if we can just make that shift, that change, sometimes life proves us wrong time and time again,
and I think
in a good way.
It's that release as well that you talk about. Sometimes you can work up a scenario in your mind, and then suddenly you've got a full-blown, almost like Netflix series going on
Yeah.
based around this one
Yeah.
incident.
Absolutely.
And then you build yourself up, and then when it actually plays itself out, it's so different to what you'd
Exactly.
imagined.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also about valuing yourself as well. You know, that's about
Yeah.
that those non-negotiables for me are not about me being obstinate. It's not that they'll never move.
Yeah.
But it's about me valuing myself and my time.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more we value ourselves, the more other people are going to value us too, and our time.
And again, I think that's in fact we've got a whole series of subject videos
we need
could
to do a
here.
mini-series.
A mini-series. But I think the subject of value is really important, because again, as business owners, we feel as though, particularly those like myself who just started out on our own business ourselves, even though we've got a vast experience behind us, we feel this need to do everything for everybody. Sometimes, or I say sometimes, what I actually mean is a lot of the time at no cost as well to that end consumer.
Yeah.
And there does come a point where you're right, and you have to say, look, I value myself, I value my experience, I value my time. And
Yeah.
because of that, there is an association, whether it's a monetary association, whether it's blocking time off in my diary association, whatever that happens to be, there is a value attached to that, a tangible value.
Absolutely.
But it's having the balls, the gumption,
It's having the balls.
to kind of realise that and and like you did, stick with that.
Yeah. But I think that's about making that journey, about realising your value first.
Yeah.
It's about really
Yeah.
realising your value and being attached to that, totally attached to that, and believing that.
Yeah.
And then it becomes easier.
Yeah, you kind of feed off that
Yeah.
inner confidence, I suppose.
Yeah. And whether you do that yourself, because obviously it's an internal journey, but I think it's also important to connect with people that can support you in doing that. You know, That's why we all want to be part of communities or friend groups, and it's about getting that support. And I think women are really good at doing that.
Yeah.
We're really good at holding each other and making each other feel valued when we get together, when we connect.
You've mentioned sort of work or female empowerment, women. That's a couple of qualities that we share, or beliefs that we share in terms of empowering women, helping them, lifting them, rising them. But in your line of work, you've consciously started to lean more towards working with women.
Yeah.
So why is it that you think women in particular require a different sort of support to men?
I think because it's been a long time coming. I think because men have had an incredible amount of support in this arena, particularly in business, for a long time, that women haven't been able to tap into.
Yeah.
So I think it's about timing. I think it's also about women now starting to feel empowered to ask for that kind of support.
Yeah.
And where we ask, we should be given. You know,
Don't ask, don't get. As well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's for a long time, women have been allowing themselves to be in the background and not asking for what they need, and you know, we can be terrible at this as women, and I hate to generalise, but I can speak from my own experience that you know how we can be in our relationships where we hint at what we need with our fellas, and we kind
What
of
we'd like for a present.
Yeah, and then you know, when it all kind of comes to a head, and the guys go, why didn't you just ask me?
Yeah.
You know, but we say, well, we kind of have been doing, but we've not been doing it directly.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we've got a long way to come in that, on a personal level and in business, in not being afraid to ask for what we need.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I want to encourage women to do, is to,
that.
for one, stop thinking that we have to be super women.
Oh, yeah.
And pretending that we don't need help and support. And that's about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable to an extent.
Yeah, that can sometimes be difficult, can't it? If you run your own business, what you feel as though you have to always be that stalwart person who's got it all together. You know, everything's organised. They're running the family as well. I don't have time to show my vulnerable side. You know, my emotion.
And it's so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because our greatest strength as women is our ability to be vulnerable and to help other women with their vulnerability, and yet we deny it in ourselves.
I think that. Do you think that sometimes comes from the fact from society as well?
Yeah.
Because if, for instance, I remember working in the environment that I did, you know, if I were to, or I felt as though if I were to show vulnerability, then that would somehow denounce me as a true leader or a manager, whatever, and that I wouldn't be seen as equal, if ever I was, to my male counterparts, for instance. Maybe I'd be too emotional. I don't know.
Yeah, but you see, isn't that interesting? Because that's another huge passion of mine, is to change leadership in that way.
Yeah.
And that's part of my mission, to empower women to become those kind of leaders that will show men how to do it. Yeah. How to really do it. How to really connect with their people. Yeah. How to really get the best from their teams and therefore their businesses. And that is about that accepting vulnerability and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, because as a leader in a business, whether that's just you working in your business on your own, we still have influence on others. Yeah. Or whether that's running a huge corporate organisation, your people are only going to be vulnerable, allow themselves to be vulnerable if they see you doing that too. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, sharing your innermost secrets with everybody on a daily basis. It just
gather round, conference call, CEO wants
I'm going to tell you what happened with my husband last night. It just means about allowing yourself to appear human, not superhuman. Yeah. And to give people something to relate to, I think. Yeah. And to, we were talking earlier about if you're running a workshop, what do you do if you run into childcare issues?
Yes. As I did not too long ago.
I don't want to cite you directly. But what do you do? Do you take your child along with you? Yeah. And does that look really unprofessional? Or do you... And, I said to you, well, look, you're a woman in business, but you're also a mother. And you have
and they're not separate.
And they are not separate. And this is what the life path stuff is about. It's about bringing your business and your life and your being human together, and finding a way of making it work together so that you feel aligned and connected. And there have been cases in the past where I have taken people along to workshops or trainings that I've been delivering. Maybe not a client session one-on-one, that might be a bit counterproductive, but there have been situations, because it's just about letting people see that you have that vulnerability and that you live a real life, just like them, and then they connect with that.
And I suppose it's that vulnerability, that human relatability aspect that we talk about, or I talk about a lot with you guys. When it comes to your social media and the type of content that you want to be able to put across as a small business owner, I say it time and again, we have what the big corporations want. We already have a genuine, down-to-earth, one-to-one connection with our clients, customers. Totally. However, again, through maybe it's societal pressure, but we feel the need to be more like the giant corporations.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's absolutely, and you lose that authenticity, that genuineness. And I know they're buzzwords, but we have that in oodles.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we seem to deny ourselves from that connection.
Isn't it weird that we're trying to be like them
and they're trying to be like us?
Because I was talking to somebody the other day that works for a huge multinational, and they're actually recruiting social ambassadors now.
Right.
I meant to mention this to you before, actually. To create little bespoke community groups, almost like focus groups for their business, because they know that huge corporate marketing approach is not working anymore, and so they've got ambassadors out in the field creating these little bespoke groups that we've already got as boutique businesses.
Could be opportunities out there, guys, for everybody.
Absolutely.
But that says it all, though, doesn't it? They realise they need to come into the community, into the kind of towns, villages, social groups, in order to really properly try and understand what it is that we as consumers want from those brands. And yet every day, either through our bricks and mortar store or one-to-one sessions or service-led businesses, we experience that all the time. when there's so much value behind that.
I used to, it wasn't as part of my business, but I somehow got involved with the street food industry.
Right.
From a marketing perspective, just helping friends in the street food industry. And as that started to grow and gather momentum, because it's a huge thing now, but I'm talking sort of 9-10 years ago, when it was still in its infancy. As it started to grow, people like, and I think one of the first to do it was Jamie Oliver.
Ah, right, okay.
Came out of his restaurants and created a street food truck,
right,
and started to muscle in on all the festivals and food markets, because he saw an opportunity to directly connect with people on the ground.
Yeah.
And he knew he'd lost that connection. Connection, you know, connection comes up time and time again. That's what it's all about. It's about connection. For us, it's about connection to us and our purpose and our calling. It's our connection to our business. It's our connection to other people in our community, in the business community, and the wider community. Connection to our clients and our customers, and to each other. Particularly for women, connection to each other.
Yeah, and connection to each other in a way that, having those connections, whichever field they're in, they're so, it goes back to what we were saying before, they're so empowering, and they give us energy, but they allow us to, like you were talking about your life path, allow us to see what potential vistas or the journeys that we want to make, and what it is we want to be able to experience along that route.
Yeah, because it's not just about going from here to there. It's about what do we want that experience to be like for us, and you know, what interesting diversions can we make, and where might our paths converge with other people's paths and create opportunities.
And so whether that's collaborations or
absolutely.
whether it's things like this that we're doing together or workshop, whatever it might be. But you're unable to see those if you don't have the if you don't go out there and connect.
Yeah,
essentially,
absolutely.
with people.
And that's one of the huge powers we have as women. The one thing that women are incredible at is building families, aren't we? Building relationships, nurturing, connecting, you know, building other people up.
Yeah.
And if we can do that collectively, can you imagine what we can make happen? I mean, really,
it's pretty mind-blowing.
That's a whole different session as well. But
we should be making a note
of all these different sessions.
Exactly.
But I mean, really, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
And that's why I do some philanthropic work with charities that support young women.
Yeah.
And also children.
Yeah.
You know, because that's our future. And you can imagine if we can persuade women that kind of thing is possible, and how valuable and powerful that is. Can you imagine what the future's going to be like?
That would happen as a result of that. There were just a couple more questions that I wanted to ask, and we could talk for hours, but I was just conscious of the length of the video. Who or what has been your biggest influence in your life?
Okay, that's an interesting one. That's a really interesting question. So books have been a massive influence for me in my life. For those that don't know my personal story, I suppose they can go and check it out, but I had quite an interesting childhood.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
It was totally batshit crazy, and I suppose that's where the business name comes from. I grew up on my own with my violent, paranoid, schizophrenic mum. And so it was an interesting, very challenging time. And so books were my great escape, and that's where I did a lot of my learning from and gathered a lot of inspiration and motivation from. You know, rather than go home after school, I would go to the library and sit until they literally threw me out and read books. So books were always, and still are, a massive influence for me.
Yeah.
That's about expanding your mind and your imagination, and that's also about connection, you know, because that's how as a child, how I connected to other parts of the world and other possibilities, and learned about how life could be different, and started to develop my own life path, because I saw how others had done it. I've read autobiographies by people like Helen Keller, who was deaf, dumb and blind, but went on to be a leading light in women's empowerment. and was a university lecturer, and that's because of somebody empowering her and believing in her, and so I started to see what was possible through her. So books are a massive influence for me, but also, despite what I might just have said and what people might think, my mother was a huge influence on me in lots of ways. I suppose in terms of teaching me how not to be, to some extent, but also knowing what I know now as an adult, in understanding her struggle and how she fought her demons, but also in how incredibly brave she was in eventually letting me go, knowing that she couldn't be the mother that she needed to be, or she couldn't, she just wasn't equipped to be a mother, and letting me go and giving me the chance of a very different life to the one I could have had if I'd had to stay. So she was a huge influence, and also she was incredibly creative. She was a trained opera singer. She was a champion Latin American dancer.
Oh my days!
So she was hugely creative. So I took huge influence from that. She introduced me to music and dance and creativity. So she was a massive influence in lots of ways.
Now you've talked about her in those different ways. It's knowing you, and I haven't known you a long time, but I can see some of those influences and why you have them and why you are the way that you are, as well. But just, I think that context of being able to go through what you went through and to take goodness and positivity and wanting to empower other people as a result of that is just pretty darn amazing anyway, because it could have easily, you took one pathway, it could easily have turned another way.
And I think that comes down to the realisation of choice. I've worked a lot over the years as well with young offenders, and this comes up a lot with young offenders, that they can be second or third generation offender, and they feel as if they had no choice, that was the path they had to follow. And so the first thing to do with young people when they're in that situation is to make them realise that they have the power of choice, and that life can be very different. And I think I realised, probably through reading those books, I'm still not quite clear on that, that I had a choice, and that it was up to me what path I chose. I somehow knew that, and I think we all have a duty to some extent. It's probably a little bit extreme, but I really think we have a purpose and a calling to use everything that we've learned in our lives to help other people. And it's like, it goes back to that kind of ranger guide scenario, that if there are people slightly further back from you on their journey, and you can help them carve their path and make it an interesting and beautiful and fulfilling path, then we have a duty to do that. So I think, all the things that I learned when there was no such thing as personal development, and there was no Waterstones, never mind a personal development section, self-help section in Waterstones, there was none of that. And I think I have a duty and a calling to use all of that learning to make the way easier and quicker for other people, particularly for women. I think, because I was a young girl, I was a young woman. I'm a woman in business, and I think, all of those tools in my kit that I have now, I genuinely want to give to other people for them to use, so that they don't have to take 52 years to get to the stage that now. They can maybe do it a little bit quicker.
I wasn't going to mention your age there. We'll gloss over that. Right, so I've just got 2 more questions left, one of which, obviously we're doing it's on my social media channel, obviously it was in the Facebook group, and that is what I do, so I can't not ask you what influence social media has had in terms of you projecting and connecting with more women.
Well, an obvious one, I suppose, is reach. So it's really sorry, we've got the fire pit on, so we're all a bit we're inhaling smoke here. We've been toasting marshmallows and everything. So reach in terms of geographical, because I've waited a bit too long to do this work, although I really feel it's happened when it was meant to happen. And so I sometimes feel in a bit of a hurry to reach as many people as I possibly can, because I know how powerful this work can be. And so it's given me a geographical reach, but it's also helped me to build communities and find communities that this is relevant, that my work is relevant to.
Yeah. Oh, well, leads neatly. That was in no way
almost
practice.
As if it was planned.
Onto. So if the viewers watching today want to know more about what it is that you do and potentially get involved with the community groups that you've set up or the work that you can carry out with them, where is it they can find you on social media?
So you can find me on Facebook at Life Path Design Global. That's my business page, or connect with me personally if you like at Michele Henshaw.
And what I'll do is in the comment section, once I've posted the video, I will pop both those details there, links.
I then also have a closed Facebook group for Life Path Design, which is The Crowd, which you're a member of.
I am a
very active member of. That's fantastic. Where we have lots of things going on that don't go on elsewhere. So we have lots of regular features, don't we? And another thing I'm really passionate about is bringing other women on to have a voice, particularly in there. So we have a monthly in session with the expert where we bring, I ask everybody what we want to know about. They come in and then we have member spotlights as well, which you've done.
I did
the inaugural member spotlight, I think, which was fantastic. So it's really about giving other women. That space is about everything I've talked about. Really, it's about connecting women. It's about women supporting women. It's about us helping and guiding each other and celebrating each other's successes and getting on board with each other's challenges. And so I really want to use that space to give other women in there a voice as well. So they can come and join the crowd with us fantastic women.
And on that note, because I'm now losing my voice, it's a very good point to say thank you so much for doing this.
You're so welcome. It's fantastic.
And it's been ace, and we could have talked for hours. Maybe we will another day on another video.
Maybe we'll do that mini-series.
I think a mini-series is great. But thank you so much for watching. And I really hope that you've taken at least one thing away from this that you can start to apply to yourself and or to your business as well. Because they're not separate.
They're not separate.
Very connected. So it's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you
so much.